Hey everybody, it's Christina of CraftyPaws. I'm here to share a process video on how I made this Harry Potter themed birthday card. I wanted to use the Diamond Die's holiday word die set for a non-holiday card, and I thought combining it with this Harry Potter themed image would be perfect. So I'm starting with the little owl from the Magic class stamp set from the Greeting Farm, and I'm stamping out the little owl to make a head wig. And I'm just using a little scrap of cardstock, and I am inking up the stamp with Memento Tuxedo Black ink on my Misty tool. And I'm stamping it out again on a little post-it note piece of paper so I can create a mask because I want to have the owl in front of Harry. So I'm now fussy cutting out the mask, and not having to fussy cut out the whole image actually saves me a little bit of time here because I only need to cut out the image on the left side of the image because that's where I'm going to have it overlapping the image of the little boy. And I'm just fussy cutting it out with a pair of Fiskars spring-loaded scissors, which are my favorite scissors because they're great for people with hand strain, like with arthritis. Now I'm taking the little boy from the Honor Students stamp set from the Greeting Farm, and I've picked out the little boy who I think looks like he's got dress robes on, and I'm gonna color him up to be like Harry Potter with the Gryffindor colors for his scarf. So I'm positioning him exactly where I want him, and I'm prepping the stamp real quick with my oils from my hands, and then I'm inking it up again with Memento Tuxedo Black ink. I didn't get it quite as crisp an image as I'd like, so I'm restamping him, and that second impression really worked. So I'm removing him, and I'm now gonna stamp out the glasses, which is also a little accessory piece from the Magic class stamp set. And I'm taking my time to position the glasses just where I want it, and unfortunately it moved all of my magnets on my Misty tool, but I've reconfirmed that the stamping would be okay where I place the paper, and I've got it butted up against the lower right hand corner of the Misty tool, so that worked out fine. Now I want him to hold a little wand, and rather than putting it on my Misty, I'm just putting it on my acrylic block because I think that is going to be easy enough to restamp if I needed to, but I only had to stamp it out once, and now I'm starting the Copic coloring. I'm coloring up all of the skin areas first with a base layer of E50, which is a pale skin tone, and then I'm putting in some shadows, marking them in where I think they would be with an E51. And then I'm reestablishing those shadows with an E21, and I'm kind of deciding that I want the shadows more on the left side, especially where the glasses are, behind the glasses, and I'm giving him just a teeny bit of blush on the top of his head where it meets his hair, the tops of his ears, and a little bit of blush along the outside by his cheeks. And I'm now blending out a little bit more, going backwards from the darkest to the lightest, and the last will be the lightest color. This is the E50 again, just to blend out all the skin tones. Now for the hair. I'm gonna give him a mid-tone kind of brown hair, and I'm starting with my lightest color, so I'm flicking in the direction that the hair segments are with an E55. And now I'm going to go in with the mid-tone brown. This is an E57, and I'm trying to flick in the direction of the curve of each segment of hair. And I find that sometimes it's easier just to flip the image around, so I've turned it upside down to do more of the flicking from the top part of his head where his part is. And in particular, I'm making sure that I've got the darker areas shadowed in, like the under parts of the hair segments. And finally, I'm going in with the darkest brown. This is an E59. And that trio really works well for us, kind of a standard brown hair color. And now you can see I've emphasized all of those little hair segments, and I'm flicking in more to give him a darker brown hair look. And now I'm going backwards again with the mid-tone brown, flicking a little bit more, blending in the whiter areas of the cardstock that are still peeking through. And lastly, I go through with that E55 again just to give him shiny hair, but not kind of white hair. And because I've gone back over with the lighter colors again, I'm reestablishing the darkest shadows with the E59. That's my normal progression of adding the Copic colors. I start from light to go all the way dark and then back to light, and then I reestablish the darkest one last time. Now for the owl. For Hedwig, I know that he's a white owl, but I don't want to leave him just white, like the cardstock white. So I've decided to use a warm gray. I've used a W1 to kind of figure out where those shadows are going to be. And then I'm blending it in with the white of the cardstock with a W0, which is an even lighter gray. And I don't want to add too much pigment because I don't want him to look like a gray owl. I want him to look like a white owl. A little beak is colored in with Y35. And now I decide I'm going to doodle in the stripes of Harry's scarf. And I'm just using a Copic multi-liner pen in 0.1 point because that thickness of that pen is very much like the thicker stamped lines. And first I'm going to lay in the golden color with a Y32 and then add shading to those segments with the Y35. I like actually the fact that I am repeating the beak color of Hedwig in this scarf, and I'm just doing some really easy Copic coloring. These segments are so small that you really don't need the normal 3 colors. 2 is just fine. And then for the maroon or crimson segments, I'm putting in a base color of R85 and adding some shadowed areas with the R89. And I think even though the contrast is large there, you can see when I go back in to blend with that lighter color, it really brings it together. But I thought the gap in the colors was too great, so I did do a little point-to-point blending. So I took my light red color, touched the tip to my dark color, and then touched it to my paper to just bridge that color gap a little bit. Now for Harry's costume or robes and pants, I've decided to go with a darker cool gray. So I'm using the C6 as the base color and then trying to add some differences in color with the C8 just to add a little bit of the feeling of shadows from the folds of the robe, and also trying to make his pants even darker with the C8. And I'm blending back in with the C6, and then I decide for his shoes I'm going to go even darker, so I'm going to use a C10. And I wanted the cast shadow of the robes to be reflected in the darker areas of the pants, so I also touched those points along with the corners, the little under areas of Harry's robes with that C10. Now I'm going back in and blending with the C8 and back again with the C6 so that it doesn't turn into like one black matte color. For the sweater underneath the robes, I decided to go with a lighter gray, so I'm using the lighter C2 and C3. I decided I'm going to add some highlights with a white gel pen. This is a Uniball Signo pen. And I'm also using that to flick on some highlights onto his glasses. I think that gives a nice glasses look. Now I'm going to go back in and doodle in Harry's scar with a Copic multi-liner pen. I believe this was a 0.03, which is even thinner. Now I'm going to cut some cardstock for a background for the card front. And I'm using Bristol paper. This is a Strathmore paper that's great for mixed media and a lot of wet mediums. And I'm using a Mama Elephant Pika frame die. It's the largest rectangle because that's rectangle cuts at exactly the A2 card size, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I'm spraying on some water on the back, and I'm also putting it on the front with my paintbrush. And I do that because I don't want the card front to buckle too much as I use some Ken Oliver color bursts. I'm using some yellows, the lemon yellow and the yellow ochre, and then also some reds, alizarin crimson and merlot. And I'm just gonna kind of try and spread out the yellows, and I'm also re-wetting the back a little bit so it doesn't buckle so much. I'm adding some more pigment, and you'll notice I'm tapping the back of the bottles. I am not squeezing the bottles because that makes too much pigment powder come out. And I'm spraying with a plain water bottle and trying to direct, the pigment powders to blend out with that water. And I was a little freaked out at this point because the reds were so vibrant and I wanted it to be more muted. But I did remember that once this pigment powder dries, it does dry much lighter. And then you also see there, I have a paper towel that's really saturated with lots of color, because this is actually the second or third card base that I've decided to make while I've got all these pigment powders and water out. And I'm just going back in and spraying, dabbing. There's no right way to do this. I decide I'm going to try and bring out some of the reds a little bit more, just dabbing it with a water brush and dotting it out. Those dots actually disappear as I spray more and dry this background paper. But I'm going back in and adding more yellow. I want the whole card front to have color and not have that white area along the edges. So I'm going back in and just taking a wet paintbrush and bringing out all those colors. I noticed that this area here has too much red, which almost looks brown. So I'm trying to dab away some of that color. I'm spritzing more, I'm adding more of the yellow, I'm spraying. I decide I'm gonna cut out some of this because I go on and on playing with these pigment powders and my water brush and my paintbrush with water and my spray bottle. So I skipped over all of that, and now you'll see me adding some Copic opaque white onto a stamping block, acrylic block, and I've diluted it with water, and then I'm spritzing it onto my card front that's all dried. Now I wait for that to dry again, and now I'm taking that Diamond Die's Believe word die from the holiday word die set, and I'm running that through my Big Shot to cut out that word from that background paper. And I skipped over, somehow I missed the videoing of cutting out that word also from some white cardstock. But I'm gonna add that card front to my card base, just gluing it on with some art glitter glue with a fine tip nozzle just to get into those nooks and crannies of where those letters are cut out. And I've glued that on, and then I skipped over this section here where I glued down 4 layers of that Believe word die that I've die cut out of white cardstock, and I've stacked them together and inset them into that die cut word area. Now for the Harry and the Hedwig, I decide on the bottom of the characters I've glued, and then toward the top I've added some thin double-sided foam adhesive squares so that there's a little bit of dimension, not too much. They're securely standing on the Believe but have a little bit of dimension toward their tops, and I'm adding some glossy accents to Hedwig's eyes, beak, and Harry's glasses. And now I decide the Believe needs a little sparkle. So I'm taking some Zig Clear Wink of Stella, and I'm gonna brush that onto this white stacked Believe. And I know it doesn't come across in the video very well. Hopefully it'll come out in the pictures that I attach to the end, but the sparkle, the shimmer in real life is fantastic on this white Believe. And lastly, I decide I'm gonna add for the card front some sequins. So I am using art glitter glue again and dabbing on, the bottle was clogged a little bit, so it took me a second. But I've dabbed on some glue, 3 by Harry's wand in different sizes of clear and white. And then 2 by the front of the Believe word, white and clear in 2 different sizes. And then 2 also at the back side of the Believe. And I like using these kinds of finishing touches in odd numbers. So you see I use 7 in 3 clusters. And then for the card liner, I printed out on my computer using some Harry Potter free font. It's your birthday, make a wish. And then I'm inking the edges of that liner with some distress ink in ripe persimmon and mustard seed. And that's the completed card. I hope you enjoyed this process video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you guys are having a wonderful crafty day.